Is psych nursing really as scary as how it sounds? Hey, what's up, guys? It's me, the Psych David C. When people think psych nursing, they usually think of nurses getting beat up by the patients. So is it actually like that? As someone who's been a psych nurse for over 6 years, I'm going to show you what psych nursing is really like. I'm going to describe things like the fast-paced environment, the emotional side of the job, how much teamwork really matters, what crisis management looks like, what the medications and assessments look like, and how often nurses really get assaulted by the patients. Let's talk about it. This video is for educational purposes only and is not meant to be medical advice. So let's start with the fast-paced environment. Most of the time, especially during day shift, psych nursing is pretty fast-paced. Like one moment you could be charting and then all of a sudden an admission shows up in the lobby and then that new patient is really aggressive and psychotic, so you gotta manage him. But then you also have a patient who's already on your unit who's also becoming aggressive and psychotic. So now you gotta deal with both of these patients. Oh, but also this patient over here is discharging right now and their ride is in the lobby, so we gotta get them ready to leave. But this other patient over here is demanding to talk to the supervisor because they don't want to be there. So as you can imagine, all of these things can just happen at the same time, and it gets pretty hectic. It can be pretty unpredictable too. Like it could be calm and quiet for a couple hours, but then all of a sudden out of nowhere, all of these things start happening. So you gotta be ready to like adapt at any new situation that arises. And also something you really need to get good at is staying calm under pressure. I've worked with so many nurses who just freak the heck out when all of these things start happening. Like they just start freaking out and they don't know what they need to do next. So you gotta be good at like staying calm and knowing like which priority you gotta do first. Like let's say for example, you have a patient who's actively being aggressive and psychotic, but at the same time you have the other patient who's demanding to speak with the manager. You literally tell that patient who wants to speak with the manager like, get out of here, we need to deal with this guy first, and then we'll help you afterwards. But you don't say it with those words in that tone. You say it in a nice, respectful way. Just be like, oh, hey, I know you want to talk to our manager. I will let them know that you would like to speak with them after we handle this emergency situation over here. And just remain calm while doing these things so you don't freak yourself out and you don't freak out everyone else around you. So yeah, if you're working day shift at least, expect a fast-paced working environment. You're pretty much going to be doing things all the time, and there's always things that can happen out of nowhere that make it busy. And next up, it's emotional work. Any nurse who tells you that they always remain calm and composed as a psych nurse are lying to you. I've even seen doctors or psychiatrists get pissed off or annoyed at their own patients, and they'll do things that they aren't supposed to be doing. You're definitely gonna run into patients who will test your patience. They're gonna curse at you. They're gonna call you names. They're gonna say you're the worst nurse ever. And no matter how tough you are internally, some of that will get to you. There will be times where you're just like, God, I hate this freaking patient. Even though you know you're not supposed to be feeling that way, you're still gonna feel it. This is especially rough when you first start because you're not used to it. But after you get more experience and you get like more and more patients like cursing you out, eventually you'll build thicker skin and it won't affect you as much. But this also goes into the other side of the emotions, which is like, when you see a patient who improves over time, you're gonna feel very emotional about how like, your care helped them improve to where they are now. I remember this one patient really specifically from when I was new. His name was Howard, and he was like super paranoid and super psychotic. Like whenever I offered him his medication, he'd be like, oh, like you're trying to kill me. Like, why are you trying to kill me? You're trying to kill everyone here. And then literally when I came back the next day, he was literally like, oh man, I'm so sorry about what I was saying yesterday. Like I didn't mean any of that. I'm so sorry. And I just remember being like, oh wow, this guy's actually pretty cool. I'm really glad to see that his condition improved. So yeah, you're gonna run into that sometimes too, where somebody who's really psychotic early on will do a complete 180 to being like a normal person later on, and those moments are like really rewarding. So psych nursing is definitely emotional work. It's gonna make you anywhere from being really happy all the way to really pissed off. And moving on to the next point, teamwork is everything. I cannot stress this enough. It doesn't matter how bad your patients are. It really matters who's on your team. You can have the best, most calm patients But if your team sucks, then you're gonna have a bad time. And this also goes the other way around. If you have the worst, most annoying patients ever, if you have the best team, you're gonna have a good day. So literally, I don't really care how bad the patients are when I get there that day. I actually care more about who's gonna be on my team for that day. Like, I used to work under this RN supervisor who's like really toxic and just makes like everyone else do all the work. So like literally every day was a bad day, no matter how good the patients were. But ever since I changed units because I didn't like working under her, I've had a lot more good days than bad days. If there's a lot of bad patients, yeah, there's gonna be a lot more work, a lot more stress. But if your team is like, calm, cooperative, they know how to get things done, they don't yell at each other, it makes psych nursing a lot more enjoyable. And also it's very valuable if your team knows how to communicate with the patients. If your team is really good at verbally de-escalating a patient, you're definitely going to have a better time. I've worked with staff members who have like no patience and like no therapeutic communication skills, and they end up just aggravating the patient most of the time. And I'm just like, dude, like, why did you say that? And then the patient ends up having like an aggressive incident where I think it could have been easily prevented if the staff member just talked to them in a better way. So yeah, a lot of how much you enjoy psych nursing, I think, is a lot of who you're working with. The team you're working with that day will literally make or break your day. And then moving on to crisis management skills, as I've mentioned, you're going to get a lot of patients who are like unhappy or aggressive because they just don't want to be there. So you're really going to learn how to like de-escalate the patient verbally before you go on to like more restrictive means. When you think about it, a lot of the times patients are upset just because their needs aren't being met. Literally, there's been so many times where a patient is upset because like they don't know why they're there because no one bothered to explain it to them. And then I just spend a couple of minutes with them like in a private area just explaining like, why they're here, how long they have to be here, how everything works. And then they're actually just like calm and happy afterwards. But there will be times where you do those right things, but the patient is still aggressive. That's when you kind of stop being like the nice therapeutic nurse and you give them two options. Like, hey, you either like calm down or we're gonna have to give you like emergency injections. So at first you're gonna be pretty bad at like knowing what you should do next. But after you gain more experience, you're gonna know like, okay, let's try nicely verbally de-escalating this patient first. And then if you sense that they're not really getting it and they're starting to get more aggressive, that's when you give them like two direct options. And then you'll also learn like when the patient actually needs emergency injections and like even when they need restraints. But basically the whole time you're there, you're kind of just handling crises. You're going to learn how to think quickly in these situations and also how to uphold the most safety. In psych, safety is like always priority number one. And then moving on to medications and assessments. Honestly, there's not many different psych meds. There's very few that are like high risk. Like let's say you accidentally give a patient double their dose of an antidepressant. Most of the time, it's just to be like, oh, okay, whatever. They're definitely not going to die, which is what matters. So for the most part, psych meds are like low risk. You're not worried about killing somebody if you do the wrong thing. And honestly, psych assessment is pretty easy too. Like I learned how to eventually just do my assessment while I'm passing the patient their medications. Because in psych assessments, you're not going to be like listening to their lung sounds or like, measuring cap refill. For the most part, it's kind of just like subjective with some objective findings. Like you'll ask them like, hey, do you have any thoughts of hurting yourself? Do you have any suicidal thoughts? Do you have any thoughts of harming others? Do you have any hallucinations? Do you hear any voices? And then there's objective things you can see without asking the patient. Like how's their facial affect? Are they like flat or appropriate? How's their body movement? Like are they walkie-talkie or do they just stay in bed the whole time? So you can just observe a lot of these things while you're talking to the patient without actually asking them. And I swear to you, I've never used a stethoscope ever in psych nursing, which is really nice because I can never hear the right lung sounds anyway. And now let's move on to probably the most asked question about psych nursing. Do nurses actually get assaulted by patients? And the truth is, yes. It doesn't happen as often as people think, but it definitely does happen. It's actually a little less common for nurses to get assaulted by patients though, compared to mental health workers, who are basically like the CNAs of psych hospitals, because they're the ones who are essentially in the front lines. Like they're the ones who are pretty much like always on the floor while nurses spend some time in the nursing station. But nurses and mental health workers can get assaulted by patients. Has it ever happened to me? Almost. I actually did a video about it if you want to check it out. It's it's titled, "I was almost attacked by a psychotic patient." But yeah, anyway, I've had plenty of coworkers actually get physically assaulted by patients. Like, I remember there was like this super nice, like really old man, probably in his 50s. He was like super nice, super soft-spoken, but also really thin. And then all of a sudden, one day he didn't show up to work. So I was like, where's Huxley? And then they told me that the day before, one of the patients actually took his head and like bashed it into the door, and then he ended up getting hospitalized and like put in a coma. That was like one of the most devastating stories like I've ever heard in my life. And then there was also this other mental health worker who's like in his 20s who got punched in the chin by a patient who had to get like a bunch of stitches. And then there's also this other mental health worker who kind of got like attacked in the eye, so now his eye is like permanently like kind of half closed like this. I would say over the last 6 years, I can probably remember maybe like 15, 20 incidents where somebody got assaulted by a patient. So it doesn't happen that often, but it definitely does happen. It really does help if you're like a bigger dude with more size, because the patients are less likely to want to attack you. But yeah, just try to make sure you're like a safe distance away from an aggressive patient, and definitely make sure you have like team members watching your back if you're like talking to someone. This also ties into the point where like whoever's on your team that day matters a lot more than the patients that day, because after you work with someone for a while, you'll know if they're like reliable if a patient ever tries to get aggressive. Like on my team, I know I can always rely on Felix if a patient gets aggressive, but I can never rely on Rachel. So yeah, there's definitely a risk of getting assaulted by patients, but honestly, it's kind of just like part of the job that you sign up for. So that was my take on how it's like working as a psych nurse. Personally, I don't think it's that bad, but every nurse is going to have their own opinion based on their own experiences. If you have any other questions about psych nursing, let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. I do videos on general psych stuff and like psych nursing stuff. I am also on TikTok and Instagram if you want to follow me over there at the Psych and David C. I do medication management for adults living in California. If you're interested, there's a link down below. And with that, your mental health just leveled up. Welcome.